First, some commentators seem to suggest that the two main parties are now look-alike, a proposition I totally reject. The fact is, Labour are still socialist, and they deliberately set out to impose more government control over people's lives. That is where their whole belief starts. It starts with the power of government over the lives of the people. That is the reason why they increase taxation. More power for them over our money, less power for the citizen. That is why they multiply controls and bureaucracy. More power for them, less for the wealth creators of our country. That is why they like nationalisation, more control over industry. That is why they reject privatisation and wider share ownership. That is why they want more council housing, because they want to have more control over the lives of the housing of the people and to use it for political purposes, as in the Camdens and the Lamberts. Opponents would have us believe that all problems can be solved by state intervention. But government should not run business. Indeed, the weakness of the case for state ownership has become all too apparent. For state planners do not have to suffer the consequences of their mistakes. It's the taxpayers who have to pick up the bill. I will tell him there's nothing whatever wrong with choice and diversity. They are central to Conservative policies, and they are precisely what Britain wants and needs. And enterprise and opportunity have become dirty words in the Labour Party because the opposition has allowed socialist ideology to blot out both common sense and the economic realities of life. What about the money? The honourable members opposite are in no condition to talk about money. They waste it time and time again. They do not know how to conduct the finances of the nation. As I indicated earlier, in 1 year it got so bad that they borrowed what today would be the equivalent of £50 billion. Of course they don't mind handing over power to other people. They handed it over to the IMF. They had to. They couldn't run it themselves. But I'll tell you this. That man is going to trip over his promises in the rush if he's not careful. There's his promise, for example, not to cut taxes for many years to come. That's the one Labour promise it's safe to believe. Indeed, the Labour leader was being unduly modest. He wouldn't cut taxes ever. Why? Because he's a socialist and they just don't like the idea. In government, they put taxes up, and in opposition they fight our proposals to bring taxes down. And taxes would go up and up if Labour spends as much of your money as they've promised. But, they say, we reform characters. Next time it will be different. We've paid our debt to society. If that were true, it would be the first ever debt Labour has ever paid. Yes, he mentioned places like Linwood. I was a member of the government that sent the factory to Linwood with the best of intentions, with all of the possible regional aids. That factory which went to Linwood made a loss in 18 out of the 19 years of its existence. And I say to him in all honesty, that could not possibly go on. He referred to the tragedy at Consett and Corby. But he was a member of a government that put off steel closures that should have been dealt with years before. His government refused to face reality in the steel industry. He pointed out that his government sustained the number of people in jobs. Is he suggesting that steel would have a better future, or that British Leyland would have a better future? If we put back all of those people who have been made redundant, they'd have had no possible future at all. Nor would productivity ever have risen, and indeed, all of the prospect of future jobs would have disappeared forever. But we mustn't flinch from the realities. It's easy for politicians to win applause by postponing the day of reckoning. But that is only self-indulgence and deceit. It is what the opposition practiced with relation to these industries in the past. And those who urge us to relax the squeeze, to spend yet more money indiscriminately in the belief that will help the unemployed and the small businessman, are not being kind or compassionate or caring. They're not the friends of the unemployed or the small business. They are asking us to do again the very thing that caused the problems in the first place. Indeed, unemployment is caused by paying ourselves more than the value of what we produce. Indeed, unemployment is caused by paying ourselves more than the value of what we produce. So said the former leader of the Labour Party, the Right Honourable Member for Cardiff South and Penarth in 1976. I come to the conclusion many times, they do not want to get rid of unemployment, they wallow in it. Yeah. Last week, Mr. President, I seemed to hear a strange sound emanating from Blackpool, and I thought at first it was seagulls. Then I remembered that Labour was holding its annual conference there, and I realised it wasn't seagulls, it was chickens. Chickens being counted before they were hatched. Mr. President, that's 4 impossible pledges so far. And I could go on for hours, quoting from Labour's lexicon of logical contradictions. There's its pledge to cut emissions of carbon dioxide by burning more coal, and its promise to improve educational standards by phasing out tests. But the really remarkable thing about Labour is they want you to swallow that they're now a party of moderation. Labour's Blackpool conference was the amateur dramatics of the season, a grand masquerade at which militants and trots peeped out from behind a painted smile. Glenda had given them a few professional tips. The audience had learned its lines, the rehearsals had gone splendidly. Ron Todd gave a dazzling performance as Mr. Moderation. Alas, on the night, the extras got everything mixed up and voted the wrong way. Putting people first, they voted to stop the existing right to buy council houses, a policy which would kill the hopes and dreams of so many families. Labour may say they put people first, but their conference voted to put government first, and that means putting people last. What the Labour Party of today wants is housing municipalised, industry nationalised, the police service politicised, the judiciary radicalised, union membership tyrannised, and above all and most serious of all, our defences neutralised. Never! And then our opponents, having lost the political argument, try another tack. They try to convey the impression that we don't care. So let's take a close look at those who make this charge. They're the ones who supported and maintained Mr. Scargill's coal strike for a whole year, hoping to deprive industry, homes and pensioners of power, heat and light. They're the ones who supported the strike in the health service, which lengthened the waiting time for operations just when we were getting it down. They're the ones who supported the teachers' dispute, which disrupted our children's education. And they are those Labour councillors who constantly accuse the police of provocation when they deal with violent crime and drugs in the worst areas of our inner cities. Mr. President, we're not going to take any lessons in caring from people with that sort of record. He made some comments about Keynes, and as far as I can make out, what he was saying was, if we all spend more than we've got, we shall get very rich. It always was a very stupid sentiment. This will be our 5th year of uninterrupted economic growth at an average of 3% a year. And this is the first time since the war that we've had such a long period of growth, coupled with both balance of payment surpluses, and low inflation. Honourable members opposite talk disparagingly of the performance of manufacturing industry, but last year British industry exported more manufactured goods than ever before in our history. And they need to be congratulated, not criticised. How they hate it when manufacturing industry does well. How they hate success. Mr. Chairman, how the Labour Party hates all this success. As the economic news gets better and better, so Mr. Hattersley's face gets longer and longer and longer. But Labour is the pessimistic party. It spreads its gloom wherever it goes. There's no joyous acceptance of what is right or determination to improve what is wrong. There's no pride in Britain's achievements. Instead, there's a compulsive concentration on failure and a kind of envy which resents success. And it's that kind of sourness which has made them a party which has given up hope. They've no hope that British industry can ever compete, so they take cover behind import controls. We believe British industry can compete, and so we're going to give it the opportunity. They've no hope and no determination to achieve multilateral disarmament on all sides. So they go in for one-sided abandonment of our deterrent, while they leave nuclear weapons in the hands of our sworn enemies. They've no hope that Britain can make her way in Europe, so they want to pull out of the common market. They've no hope of real jobs for our people, so they go in for false jobs, whatever the cost. The old Britain of the 1970s, with its strikes, poor productivity, low investment, winters of discontent, above all its gloom, its pessimism, its sheer defeatism, that Britain is gone. We stood firm, and last year in Britain there were fewer strikes than at any time since the war. Every one of those reforms has been opposed by the Labour Party. The Labour Party want to abolish self-governing hospitals because NUPE says so. They want to abolish independent state schools and city technology colleges and assisted places because the NUT says so. They fought our training reforms time after time because the TUC said so. The right honourable gentleman is fond of talking about supply-side socialism. Now we know what that means. Whatever the unions demand, Labour will supply. He seems to have forgotten that the damage caused by the collapse of the pound under his government in 1975 and 76 far outweighed its transitory benefits. Finally, Mr. Speaker, he seems to have forgotten that this country has been bedeviled in a moment for the last 25 years by a rising trend of unemployment. A trend which has been caused by the underlying weakness of our industrial economy and the fact that we've just not been sufficiently competitive. Then there's this plan of Labour's for smaller, more decentralised government, which would contain 2 brand new ministries, a couple of new departments of state, 9 different bodies in each region, 100 new committees, heaven knows how many councils and commissions on top, and a great herd of quangos thundering up Whitehall, a mere 2012 new bureaucratic bodies in all. It's the oldest law of politics. Government tends to expand, and socialist government expands absolutely. Labour has no hope for Britain, and it offers no hope to Britain. They've no faith in the British people. Because to Labour's fury, millions of people have bought shares in privatised industries, like British Telecom. Like British Telecom, British Airways, British Gas, and in TSB, and there's more to come. The honourable gentleman has given his usual speech. He totally overlooks the economic resurgence that we have brought about in the last 12 years. Indeed, one wonders what country he has been living in. Until 1979, we were in the corporate state era. It was an era of relative economic decline and social disintegration. We enter the 1990s with the supply side of the British economy in incomparably better shape than at incomparably better shape than at any time in our history. Those are not my words. They are the words of the CBI's Director General. Mr. President, Labour's banner reads back. Back to a high-tax society. Back to the old days of inflation by social contract. Back to rule by Congress House, when the Labour Party was a wholly owned subsidiary of the unions. The honourable gentleman and his party have a rather different view. They still believe that prosperity can be created by politicians rather than by enterprise. So they'd make, I quote, strategic interventions in key sectors of industry. In other words, take money from successful firms to hand out to failures. The fact is that the countries which were most efficient, the countries which had not got over manning, the countries whose governments had faced realistically the economic problems before 1979, of course they ride the world recessions better. They are Germany, they are France, they are Japan. They are all the countries which followed the very policies which the Right Honourable Gentleman's government rejected, and which we are now trying to follow today, to his own policies. They seem to amount to spend more, tax less, and meet the difference by printing and call it reflation. I must say to him that if anything like those proposals were adopted, the pound would plunge and inflation and interest rates would rocket. And it would be no use pretending that reimposing exchange controls would help, because look at 1976, there were exchange controls then, yet the pound plunged. And if the pound plunges with consequent increases in interest rates and inflationary expectations, bang will go all our hopes for more jobs. And that would be the effect of the Right Honourable Gentleman's policy. But what are the alternative policies? Are the opposition suggesting that we put up income tax? They did that in 1974 and 1975. More and more people were brought into tax, and as a result, incentive and enterprise were destroyed. Are they suggesting we borrow even more and allow interest rates to rise still further? The right honourable gentleman seemed to know the answer a year ago. In that same speech he said, what would be the result of a small increase in the quantity of money financing very large wage settlements of 20 or 30%? There could only be one result. The weakest firms would go to the wall and there'd be more unemployment. In addition, instead of easing interest rates, the country would be faced with a further tightening. The same holds true today, but for reasons of his own, the right honourable gentleman chooses to ignore his own warnings. 11 years ago, we rescued Britain from the parlous state to which socialism had brought it. I remind this House that under socialism, this country had come to such a pass that one of our most able and distinguished ambassadors felt compelled to write in a famous dispatch, a copy of which found its way into The Economist, the following words. He said, "We talk of ourselves without shame as being one of the less prosperous countries of Europe. The prognosis for the foreseeable future," he said in 1979, "was discouraging. Conservative government has changed all that." And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap were that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way. Deal with both analysis and policies. But first I would like to spend one moment on looking at the Labour Party's credentials for bringing this motion before the House. Of course they won't want me to. It exposes just exactly what happened when they put their policies into practice. Their first act on taking up office in 1974 was to introduce the same quack remedies. They then introduced the same quack remedies which they advocate today. In their first year, they increased public spending by £15 billion in today's money. By August 1975, inflation reached the record level of 26.9%. Record inflation, the record held by the socialist government. And did that extra expenditure and extra inflation cause unemployment to fall? Of course not. 1 year later, they had more than doubled the unemployment level they'd inherited. And what they have to prove now is why, when those policies had that effect then, they would not have a similar effect if they were put into execution today. By the autumn of when I have finished this particular point, as the honourable gentleman knows I customarily do, by the autumn of 1976, Labour's credit was exhausted. No one would lend them money, and they had to go to the IMF for help. That was their policy in practice. Record inflation, and it doubled unemployment. No amount of distance lends enchantment to the lean years of Labour, which gave us the lowest growth rate in Europe, the highest strike record, and for the average family, virtually no increase in take-home pay. Labour's policies are a vote of no confidence in the ability of British people to manage their own affairs. Can't be the nation's finances. We are repaying debt, including the debt run up by the party of the right honourable gentleman opposite. 27% was never the average of European inflation. That was the socialist record. That was the socialist record. He mentions unemployment. May I point out today that yes, unemployment has again doubled in Britain. May I also point out that according to the European Commission, I do not use my own figures, unemployment has also doubled in Europe. If people request me to answer their questions, I shall, of course, answer them. If I'm to give way, there's no point unless I answer the questions. The honourable gentleman can't stand the answers. That's his trouble, because they're right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11 and a half wonderful years, and we're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state than when we came here 11 and a half years ago. It's been a tremendous privilege to serve this country as Prime Minister. Wonderfully happy years, and I'm immensely grateful to the staff who've supported me so well. And may I also say a word of thanks to all the people who sent so many letters still arriving, and to all the flowers. Now it's time for a new chapter to open, and I wish John Major all the luck in the world. He'll be splendidly served, and he has the makings of a great Prime Minister, which I'm sure he'll be in very short time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
The curtain falls. It's time to get off the stage, and that is what I propose to do. I shall therefore advise my parliamentary colleagues that I believe that it would be appropriate for them to consider the selection of a new leader of the Conservative Party to lead the party through opposition during the years that lie immediately ahead. Naturally, I shall remain at the service of the party during what I hope will be a reasonably brief interregnum. I hope as I leave Downing Street this morning that I can say with some accuracy that the country is in far better shape than it was when I entered Downing Street. The economy is booming, interest rates low, inflation low, unemployment falling. I believe that the incoming government, to whom I repeat my warm congratulations upon their success, the incoming government will inherit the most benevolent set of economic statistics of any incoming government since before the First World War.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
It's a vote for New Labour, for a new type of politics.
Ask me my three main priorities for government, and I tell you, education, education, and education.
Join us. Join with Labour. Together we can build the great British society and end the shame of child poverty in Britain. We should do more for those who have the greatest needs.
Gordon Brown's plans to do away with the 10p tax band would hit millions of the lowest paid workers.
Prime Minister, have you made a mistake? Never again will we allow the retirement plans of tens of thousands of Britain's working people to be ruined. My immediate priority is the NHS.
Over 40,000 patients have died from MRSA and C. difficile.
Relatives of those who died are demanding an inquiry into the worst ever NHS hospital scandal.
On Tuesday night, I gave the order for British forces to take part in military action in Iraq. Their mission? To remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
The 45-minute claim was based on unsubstantiated intelligence.
We will keep in our minds and hearts the work of courage that is being done by our soldiers and our armed forces in Afghanistan. And we will support them in every way. The defence budget has been rising every year. I do accept that in 1 or 2 years, defence expenditure did not rise in real terms.
The Home Office has denied the Gurkhas residency, despite them putting their lives on the line for this country.
We abhor waste and imprudence in public spending.
I believe that the Dome will be good for Britain, for jobs, for tourism.
You're not talking about something down at the DIY store.
One's eyes naturally turn to Lord Irvine's wallpaper, since it costs £300 per roll.
I certainly do not think that any apologies are due.
ID cards will cost the taxpayer almost £1 billion, but critics say they won't make us any safer.
The refurbishment at Ed Ball's schools department included a massage room and contemplation suite, and cost the taxpayer £3 million.
We will put stability first, so we don't return to these old boom and bust stop-go days.
Indeed, it now seems likely that the UK economy is entering recession.
This is the worst recession in 60 years.
They have finally brought the curtain down on Woolies.
I will never let the deficit get out of control. It is a goal that this party has long sought: full employment for our country.
Youth unemployment has hit a record high.
Economic responsibility, planning for the long term, building stability from solid foundations. Labour is working.
No more sleaze, no more lies, no more broken promises.
The Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone has admitted he gave the Labour Party £1 million.
Lord Levy, Blair's top fundraiser, was arrested and bailed over the alleged trade in cash for honours. In December, the Prime Minister himself was questioned by police.
Jailed in 3 continents for fraud, facing deportation from Britain. This is Peter Foster, the man who Cherie Blair chose to help buy a flat for her son.
I'm a bit like a sort of cab for hire, I suppose.
Stephen Byers and 2 other former Labour ministers were today caught in a cash for lobbying scandal.
The British people have put their trust in us.
That I did not lie, I did not deceive, and I did not set out to mislead.
Tonight, Peter Mandelson came back to the house that has cost him his job.
What I've said about not fast-tracking was untrue. And in those circumstances, I think it's beholden on me to step down.
The Hinduja passport affair has forced Peter Mandelson to resign from government for the 2nd time.
There's no question of his coming back into government.
David Blunkett was caught out in a conflict of interests over shares in a DNA testing company.
It shall be a government rooted in strong values.
Cheerio.
This is the man who brought spin to Downing Street.
Charlie Whelan, Gordon Brown's spin doctor, resigned after being caught briefing against his own colleagues.
The Transport Secretary's special advisor, Joe Moore, suggested it was a good day to bury bad news.
Gordon Brown's right-hand man, Damien McBride, was forced to resign after planning a vicious smear campaign against Tory MPs and their families.
I am not a team of one. As everybody can see, I'm one of a team. It's hardly surprising that, as in any relationship, there have been times when we've differed.
There have been arguments, feuds, and rumours of blazing rows.
Alistair Darling is not only a very good personal friend of mine, but he's also been a great chancellor.
Forces of hell were unleashed. Forces of hell were unleashed.
Caroline Flint has accused the Prime Minister of treating her like window dressing.
Minutes after polls closed, James Purnell resigned from the cabinet and called on Gordon Brown to stand down.
120 days from the likely date of a general election, and there's an attempted coup in the Labour Party.
I can't understand why anybody would oppose the idea of a secret ballot.
There have been public calls for the Prime Minister to resign, there have been private briefings, speculation, all the rest of it.
He is a man who is strong, sound in his convictions, true to his principles.
But today he was accused of shoving one of his aides, grabbing another by his lapels, swearing and losing his temper.
You're a very good woman. You've served the community all the life. Should never have put me with that woman.
What did she say?
Everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman.